I am standing on a beach, warm sand under my bare feet, waves rolling in, one after another, breaking softly against my ankles. Somewhere ahead of me, a sun is rising over a Mediterranean fishing village, gold light spilling across the water. But there is no sky above me. There is a ceiling, and the nearest real ocean is more than 1,300 kilometers away. This is inside one single building in the city of Chengdu in southwest China. The largest building on the planet by floor area. 1.76 million square meters of enclosed space, sealed under one roof, big enough to swallow the Pentagon almost 3 times over. I came here certain it was a gimmick, a rich country's expensive joke. I walked out understanding it was something else entirely, something the rest of the world has not yet taken seriously. Because the real reason a landlocked Chinese city manufactured its own ocean has almost nothing to do with tourism. It has to do with a railway line that ends in Germany, a national strategy written into government planning documents, and a question about where the future of a fifth of humanity is actually being built. I want to take you inside with me, step by step, the way I saw it. And I want to warn you now, the moment that unsettled me most was not the beach. It came later, when I looked at a map. The first thing you need to understand is that I almost did not believe the photographs. I had seen them online for years. The giant glowing screen, the fake sunset, the crowds of people swimming indoors. I assumed it was edited, exaggerated, the way everything from China gets exaggerated in both directions, hyped by some and dismissed by others until you cannot tell what is real, so I went to find out for myself. And the moment my taxi turned the corner and the building came into full view through the windshield, I actually stopped talking mid-sentence. I remember the driver glancing at me in the mirror, because I had gone completely silent. It does not look like a building. It looks like a landform, a wave of glass and steel frozen in the act of crashing, stretching so far in both directions that you cannot photograph it from the ground. You simply cannot fit it in the frame. The official name is the New Century Global Center. It opened to the public in the summer of 2013, and the raw dimensions are difficult to hold in your head. It is 500 meters long, 400 meters wide, 100 meters tall at its peak. That footprint alone covers an area larger than many entire town centers, but length and width do not capture it. Floor area does, because inside, the building folds upward through level after level, and when you add every floor together, you reach that staggering figure, 1.76 million square meters. To give you something to hold on to, that is roughly 20 times the floor space of the Sydney Opera House, packed into a single structure. Engineers have pointed out you could fit around 329 football fields inside it. I walked one length of it, just the ground level, at a normal pace. It took me the better part of 15 minutes, and I had not even turned the first corner. Inside this one structure, there are shopping districts, 2 5-star hotels, a commercial office complex, an Olympic-sized ice skating rink, a multiplex cinema, a fake Mediterranean village built at full scale, a pirate ship, and a university campus zone. There is a research and conference center. There are pedestrian streets with their own traffic flow. People work here, sleep here, shop here, exercise here, and never once step outside. And here is what got under my skin as I stood in that central atrium, neck craned upward at a glass roof 100 meters over my head. I had come expecting a big mall. A big mall is impressive, but it is a thing you understand. This was not a big mall. This was a sealed environment, a controlled world with its own weather, its own light cycle, its own coastline. The temperature inside stays comfortable all year, somewhere in the low 20s Celsius, regardless of whether it is freezing or sweltering outside. The light never truly fails. The waves never stop. And I had not even reached the beach yet, because the beach is the part they put on the postcards, and the beach, somehow, was even stranger up close than it looked in every photo I had doubted. They call it Paradise Island, and the first thing that hits you before you see anything is the sound. You hear the ocean before you see it, that deep, rhythmic rush of surf, breaking and pulling back, breaking and pulling back. Standing in a hallway in a building in the middle of the Chinese interior, my body responded the way it has responded to that sound my entire life. My shoulders dropped. I felt myself relax. My brain told me, the sea is near. Then you turn the corner, and the space opens up into a water park, the size of a stadium, and at the far end of it stands the thing that does not let go of you, a screen. An enormous LED wall, around 150 meters across, curving along the back of the artificial coastline. And on that screen, in perfect high resolution, the sun is rising over the sea. Clouds drift, light shifts across the water. Later in the day, it will become a blazing afternoon, and then it will soften into a sunset, the whole village glowing amber, and then a clear, starry night will come. A full day, an entire sky, manufactured and looped, hour after hour. In front of the screen, real sand, imported, graded, raked smooth, stretching down to the water. The artificial beach can hold thousands of people at once, and on a busy day it does. Families with umbrellas, children digging, couples lying in the warm light coming off that screen, and the water moves. This is the detail that broke my last bit of skepticism. It is not a still pool, pretending to be the sea. There is a wave generation system buried under the far end, machinery that pushes swells across the surface, so that real waves roll in and break on real sand, in steady sets, exactly like surf. People stand waist deep and let the waves hit them. Lifeguards watch from raised chairs as if the open ocean were genuinely a danger here. I stood at the waterline, and I will tell you honestly, I lost track of where I was. The smell of the water, the warmth on my face from that fake sun, the sound, the crowd, the horizon painted on the wall. For a few seconds, my brain simply accepted it. I was at the seaside. Then I looked straight up, saw the steel trusses of a roof 100 meters overhead, and the whole illusion snapped, and the strangeness of it ran through me like cold water. These people were not at the beach. They had been brought the beach. The entire ocean had been disassembled into its component sensations: sand, salt, surf, sunlight, horizon, and reassembled indoors. In a city where many of the people splashing in that water had never in their lives seen a real coast. Chengdu sits deep in the Sichuan Basin, ringed by mountains, far from any coastline in every direction. For a huge share of the people who live there, especially the older generation and the children of families who moved in from the surrounding countryside, the sea was something from television, a place you might reach once in a lifetime, after a long and expensive journey to the East Coast. So someone made the decision that if the people could not easily get to the ocean would be built where the people already were. And they did not build a modest version. They built one capable of holding a crowd, kept it running every single day of the year, and crowned it with an artificial sun that never burns out and never disappoints with bad weather. I want you to sit with how deliberate that is. This was not an accident of architecture. Somebody looked at a landlocked population of millions and decided the absence of a sea was a problem worth solving with concrete, steel, imported sand, and a 150-meter screen. But standing there, dripping, watching a toddler chase a fake wave, I kept asking myself the question that would not leave me alone. Why? Why would anyone spend this kind of money and engineering on a beach in the middle of the country? And the more I dug into the answer, the more I realized the beach was the smallest part of the story. Because to build something this size, in this place, China had to first do something to the city around it that almost nobody outside the country was watching. And that is the whole thought I want to sit with for just a moment before we go further, because understanding the scale of what is happening here is exactly why I wrote about it at length. If this kind of analysis is what you are looking for, the infrastructure underneath the spectacle, the strategy behind the headline, I have gone much deeper on all of it in my books, including China's Edge, Deep Capital, and Full Stack. They are linked in the description below, and if you have been watching these videos wanting more than a single story can hold, that is where I have put it. But let us keep walking through this building, because the beach was only the beginning of what unsettled me. Let me back up and tell you what Chengdu actually is, because if you are like me, you had barely heard the name before, and that itself is part of the point. For most of modern history, China's wealth and ambition lived on the coast. Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, the great port cities facing the Pacific, where the factories were, where the ships came in, where the money flowed. The interior, the vast western reach of the country, was the poorer, slower, forgotten part. Chengdu was a regional capital known mostly for spicy food and giant pandas. Pleasant, provincial, off the map for global business. Then, around the turn of the millennium, the Chinese government launched something it called, in plain language, the Open Up the West strategy. The official decision was made in 1999 and rolled into the national plans that followed. The goal was blunt: pull the center of gravity inland, pour investment, infrastructure, and industry into the interior provinces that the coastal boom had left behind. And Chengdu became one of the great test cases of that strategy. In the space of 2 decades, a city most Westerners could not place on a map turned into a metropolis of more than 20 million people in its wider area. Intel built a major chip facility there. Foxconn assembles devices there. The city became a manufacturing and technology hub of genuine global weight, the kind of place where a serious share of the world's laptops and tablets quietly come from. The New Century Global Center was the flag planted on top of all of that. It rose in a brand new district called Tianfu New Area, the deliberately planned future heart of the city, an area conjured almost from scratch on the southern edge of Chengdu. The building was not a shopping mall that happened to get big. It was a statement, a declaration that the interior had arrived, that the west of China could build something the coast had never even attempted, that the future of the country was no longer going to huddle by the sea. And once I understood that, the beach stopped being a gimmick in my mind and became something almost defiant. The coast had the ocean, so the interior built its own. You have the Pacific. We will manufacture our seaside indoors, under a roof, and run it 365 days a year in perfect weather. But here's where I need to stop and turn this around. Because if you are watching this from outside China, from somewhere in North America or Europe or anywhere the news treats all of this as faraway spectacle, you might be thinking, this is just an interesting story about somebody else's country. A weird giant building far away. Fun to look at. Nothing to do with you. I thought the same thing. And I was wrong. And I want to show you exactly why. Because this reaches into your life more directly than you would guess. Start with the simplest thing. The device you are watching this on right now. There is a real chance some component of it, or something in your home, passed through Chengdu on its way to you. That obscure inland city I had barely heard of is woven into the supply chain that fills Western homes. When a place like that rises, it does not stay local. It reorganizes where things get made, which means it reorganizes where jobs live and where they disappear. Now think about what this building actually proves. It proves a capability. Not the capability to build a beach, that is the surface. The deeper capability is this: a government and a construction industry that can decide to relocate the economic center of a country of 1.4 billion people inland, hundreds of kilometers from the coast, and then physically build the cities, the factories, the transport, and yes, the luxuries, to make people want to live there, and then execute it in roughly 20 years. Ask yourself how long it takes to build anything of scale where you live. A single rail line, a single airport expansion, a single bridge. Count the years of planning, the lawsuits, the budget overruns, the projects that die in committee. Now look at a building 500 meters long with an ocean inside it, finished and opened, part of a district that did not exist before, in a city that reinvented itself in a generation. This is the part that should reach you personally. It is not that China built a big building. It is that the gap in speed, in scale, in the sheer ability to decide something and then make it real in physical concrete is widening. And every product you buy, every supply chain you depend on, every strategic calculation your own government makes sits downstream of that gap. I went looking for a tourist attraction. What I found was evidence. Evidence that the ability to remake the physical world at enormous scale has shifted, and that much of the Western public is still picturing China as a place that copies cheaply rather than a place that can build the largest enclosed structure on Earth in a city most of us cannot find on a map. And the heating bill, so to speak, of that capability is not abstract. When a country can move its industry inland, away from vulnerable coastlines, it becomes harder to pressure, harder to blockade, harder to isolate. Which brings me to the thing I found at the very end, the detail that changed how I understood every part of this building. The reason I told you at the start that the beach was not what unsettled me, it was the map. I was sitting in a cafe inside the building, of all places, looking at logistics data on my laptop, trying to understand why so much industry had been pushed into this specific inland basin. And I pulled up the route maps for something called the China Railway Express, the freight rail network that runs from China straight across Central Asia into Europe. And there was Chengdu, not as a stop, as a starting point, as one of the major origin terminals for freight trains that load up in the Chinese interior and roll, without ever touching a Chinese port or a single ocean, all the way to cities in Poland, Germany, and beyond. Trains leaving Chengdu reach European rail hubs in around a couple of weeks, cargo moving overland across the spine of the entire Eurasian continent. And that is when it hit me, sitting next to a fake beach in a landlocked city. For 300 years, the logic of global power has been the logic of the sea. Whoever controlled the oceans controlled trade. Coastlines were where wealth lived, because ships were how goods moved, and a nation far from the coast was a nation cut off from the world. That is why China's boom started on its eastern shore, facing the Pacific, dependent on ports and sea lanes that other navies could, in a crisis, choke. What I was looking at on that screen was a deliberate escape from that logic. By building rail corridors across land, China can move goods to Europe without a single ship, without passing through any strait that a rival fleet could close. The interior, the part that was poor and forgotten, the part that the sea forgot, suddenly becomes the safest and most connected part of the country. Strategic depth, an economic heartland tucked behind mountains, beyond the reach of any blockade, linked to half the world by steel rail instead of open water. And right there, at the symbolic center of that inland heartland, somebody built an ocean. Look at it again with that in mind. A city that no longer needs the sea for trade, that has replaced ocean shipping with overland rail, that has deliberately moved itself beyond the reach of naval power, turns around and builds, indoors, under a roof, in perfect permanent weather, its own private sea. The one thing the interior was supposed to lack, the thing that was supposed to keep it poor and disconnected. Manufactured at will, on demand, with an artificial sun rising over it every single day, that beach is not a joke. It is a flex. It is a civilization saying, we no longer depend on your oceans for our prosperity. And to prove it, we have built our own, where we please, on land you cannot reach. I do not think most of the people splashing in those waves think about any of this. To them, it is a fun day out, an affordable seaside in a city far from the coast. And that is exactly what makes it so quietly powerful. The strategy is not announced. It is simply lived. Children build sandcastles on top of one of the most significant shifts in global economic geography in a century, and they have no idea, and they do not need to. I walked back out onto that fake sand after I closed my laptop, and I looked at the whole thing completely differently. The waves rolling in on machinery, the sun climbing a screen on a fixed loop, never setting for good, never failing, the crowds who had been given the ocean because they would no longer go to it, and I felt that mix of awe and unease that I had been chasing since I first doubted the photographs. Because the building is real. The numbers are real. 1.76 million square meters, 500 meters long. The largest enclosed structure on Earth, opened in 2013, in a city that turned itself from a provincial backwater into a global manufacturing hub and the launch point of trains to Europe, all inside a single human lifetime. I came to laugh at a fake beach. I stayed to understand that I had badly underestimated what was happening here, and that the underestimation itself was the danger, not the building, the blind spot. Here is what I cannot stop thinking about. The West largely greeted this place, when it noticed it at all, as a curiosity, a bizarre extravagance. Look at the silly giant mall with the indoor sea. And while we were laughing at the beach, the railway underneath the city was quietly rerouting the trade of a continent away from the oceans we built our entire strategic worldview around. That is the pattern I keep finding, over and over, in every one of these projects I go to see in person. The spectacle distracts, the headline invites a joke, and buried in the boring infrastructure underneath the spectacle is the part that actually changes the balance of the world. We see the sandcastle, we miss the foundation. So if you only remember one thing from standing on this beach with me, let it be this. The ground really has shifted, and it shifted while a lot of very smart people were busy being amused. The largest building in the world is not a monument to excess. It is a monument to a country that decided it would no longer be limited by geography, by coastline, by the sea itself, and then went out and physically proved it could manufacture even the ocean on its own terms. You are the kind of person who wants to see that for what it is, before the rest of the crowd catches up. That is why you made it all the way to the end of this with me, past the easy joke about the fake sun to the part that actually matters. So, let me ask you something specific, and I genuinely want you to answer. That artificial sun, the 150-meter screen that rises over a manufactured sea every single day and never sets for good, does that strike you as a wonder, or does it strike you as a warning? Tell me in the comments. And tell me which country you are watching from, because I want to see, on this one, where in the world people are landing on that question. If you want to keep seeing these places the way they really are, not the way the headlines flatten them, stay with me, because the next site I went to makes this beach look small. It is a structure in the Chinese desert that is quietly turning sand into farmland on a scale I did not believe until I stood in the middle of it and watched green stretch all the way to the horizon where there used to be nothing but dust. I will take you there next, and I will show you the number on the official planning document that made me put my camera down and just stare. The waves are still rolling in behind me as I leave. The sun is climbing the screen again, right on schedule. And not one person on this beach has any idea they are standing on the future, but you do now. And that is the whole point. Walk back through that building with me one more time, in your mind, now that you know, the skating rink, the pirate ship, the Mediterranean village built full scale under a steel sky. None of it is decoration. All of it is proof of a single capability, the power to build any world they choose, anywhere they choose, no matter what nature put there first. That is the thought I carried out the doors and onto the street, back into the real Chengdu air, the mountains somewhere beyond the smog, the freight trains loading a few kilometers away for their 2-week run to Germany. I had arrived a skeptic. I left a witness, and I have not been able to look at a map of the world the same way since. If you're still here with me, you're exactly who I built this for. This video gave you the overview, but inside the circle, I pick up right where I stopped, taking you into the national strategy behind Chengdu's inland ocean. In there, you ask me your own questions, and I answer you myself. No bots. You'd belong among thousands just like you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime. One click. No risk. If a project this enormous left you curious, there's plenty more waiting right here. Subscribe and keep exploring with me, because China keeps building things you simply have to see to believe.